The Jesse Blake Sports Report with Jesse Blake.
The 2024 Paris Olympics are officially underway with the lighting of the torch and the opening ceremonies that took place last night. And if I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, the audience, come in close. I watched it on tape delay. I feel like when you have a 4-hour event, you take advantage of technology and you don't really need to watch it live and in the moment. It's not like it was a game being played where you should watch it live. No, it's just a show. So I watched it on tape delay so I could fast forward through the commercials. But what an opening ceremonies it was. And I have 10 notes coming out of the opening ceremonies that I just want to chat with you about. Let's start with the end. My first note from the opening ceremonies is the end of it with the torch. The torch might have been the coolest Olympic torch I've ever seen. If you haven't seen it, the French have found a way to get a hot air balloon. It's not really a hot air balloon, like it's not made with hydrogen, but they had the first hydrogen hot air balloon ever in France. Like the French guys invented it, and they have the torch suspended in the air with a hot air balloon holding it up. It is unbelievable. Like that ending, it put a whole cap on a spectacular show with a mind-blowing just event where you have a flame in the air, suspended in the air, raised up from a hot air balloon. My mind was blown with just the way they got that done, the idea just in your mind to do that and then to execute it perfectly and to have the flame suspended in the air for the 2 weeks of the Olympics is really a sight to behold. And I think it's really cool that they're putting it out in the open in the public because it's not in the stadium where it usually is, which is like more restricted. You know, if you're not going to see an event in the stadium, you won't see the flame. They have it out for the French people to just go and visit and look at it as it's in the air, which was a spectacular thing. And I think it's really cool that they did it. Number two, a little too long. I talked about the end. Let's continue talking about the end. When I was done, I was like, whoo, that was a lot of time that just went by. Even watching it not live, it still took me 3 hours and something to get through all of it. I don't know how, I guess there was a lot of vignettes that they did in between the Parade of Nations. And I think it's not like I didn't enjoy it, but you can definitely condense the time just for a viewing audience that has the 2024 brain that I have that's on TikTok and our attention span isn't the best. 3 hours, I think, for anything, any type of medium is too long, whether it's Killers of the Flower Moon or anything, whatever show you're watching. Everything seems a little too long these days. And if it's a 3-hour, 4-hour presentation with all the commercials and anything, it's unnecessary. Cut it down a little. That's note number two. Note number three is the no stadium part of the whole opening ceremonies. One thing that they're doing with the Paris Olympics is with the opening ceremonies, if you watched it, you know it's the first time they're not held in the main stadium. And seeing how it unfolded, thumbs up for that idea. Utilizing the river and having the Parade of Nations on the river was awesome. And I think that more nations going forward who are going to be more cities going forward who are hosting the Olympic Games will look at it as an opportunity to do something a little different. And I think that the foresight to do something creative like this is going to lead to other cities trying to one-up it and not only using the stadium for the pageantry, but the city itself. I feel like that's a big part of the Olympic Games is learning about the city in different countries and everything, and being in France during the opening ceremonies and not just in the stadium was awesome. And they had the Phantom of the Opera taking you through different parts of French culture with the torch, and the Phantom of the Opera being at the Louvre and being in different parts of the city and just showcasing everything. I thought was really well done. But side note on that, I don't know what the experience would have been like for fans. I feel like fans wouldn't have gotten a good view of anything happening. I know there was some stands set up along the Parade of Nations, but I wonder how many fans could actually watch the events take place, because it really is a TV show. It's a made for TV show, and so much of the area around the Parade of Nations was taken up by them doing dances or shows or singing and Lady Gaga, which we'll get to. So I wonder how many fans actually got to watch the opening ceremonies live and in person. That would be my only note about not having it in the stadium. And speaking of the Parade of Nations, one thing that I thought was one of the craziest parts of the Parade of Nations was seeing North Korea out there and the North Korean athletes, and what a moment that must have been for them. And it was, once I saw North Korea, I was like, I have so many questions about them sending athletes. So I did some digging on North Korea being in the Parade of Nations, and I saw they're sending 16 athletes, which is quite a few. I think that for a relatively small country, 16 athletes is good. That's a great number. It's the first time since Rio that they are sending anybody. They haven't been in the game since then. They're the athletes that are there. I'm like, okay, so are they experiencing the world for the first time? There's so many questions, and apparently, so according to some of the articles I read, they're staying in a secluded area in the Olympic Village, so they're not with the other athletes. Athletes can't just go and interact with them. They're with handlers the entire time, so some of the handlers were with them on the boat, but they're still outside of their country. Their athletic prowess has earned them this trip into the rest of the world, which is a very sad but very endearing and hopeful and joyous occasion for these people who are controlled by their country, for them to be out of it. And just seeing the North Korea boat, I was like, oh, this is kind of what the Olympics are about, is bringing everybody, no matter if you're from this country like North Korea, everybody is there together for the Olympics, for celebrating sport. So that, it brought a weird tear to my eye, in that I was happy for these people, but then I also remember they're like with handlers and can't do anything, but they're also seeing Paris. Like, that's something that I assume a lot of North Koreans will never experience. Anyways, that was the note about North Korea that I put down there. Also, side note, they incorrectly announced South Korea as North Korea during the Parade of Nations in the actual opening ceremonies. If you were there live, not on the TV broadcast, obviously, wherever you're watching at home, but in the stadium, they accidentally called South Korea North Korea when they came through, and they had to profusely apologize to South Korea for doing that. That is a huge blunder. Number 6 on my list is my favorite part of the entire opening ceremonies. That was a headless Marie Antoinette with rock music at the place where she was held captive in France, and the confetti of the symbolism of blood and the people that rose up and fought the powers in France, and having the headless Marie Antoinette singing with the rock music. That was so spectacularly done, and it has the intersection of art and history and culture that the opening ceremonies are meant to illustrate. And that moment right there was a perfect example of everything you want out of the opening ceremonies. And I thought that was one of one in terms of moments within the opening ceremony. So all credit to whoever came up with that idea. One of the more questionable moments, number 7, of the opening ceremonies, I'm like, why? Lady Gaga. What does Lady Gaga have to do with France? You remember that there's that Kanye Kanye line where Lady Gaga becomes the head director of Polaroid, and Kanye is like, what the hell does Lady Gaga know about cameras? And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what does Lady Gaga have to do with France? Maybe I haven't done my research on that to know why she was included in the opening games, but at least like Celine Dion is a global icon who also speaks French and has French heritage because she's French Canadian. Okay. All right. I get why you have Celine Dion there. What's Lady Gaga's tie to France? Don't understand. Maybe I need to look that up. If you know, let me know in the comments on the YouTube channel or on Twitter or wherever you interact with the show. Big question. Other big celebrity who I thought had the let's use the Gen Z term aura. Most aura from the Olympic opening ceremonies. LeBron James holding the flag for America on the biggest boat that any nation had because they have the most athletes and they had their own giant cruise ship. LeBron holding a giant American flag like he's Christopher Columbus discovering America. Oh my gosh. Was that not a really cool moment for LeBron's life and just the world itself and America having the King James holding their flag, and Coco Gauff, who got a little disrespected, and I'm doing it right now. She was also the flag bearer, but LeBron, with his stature, was standing there just so prominently in front of the entire world, and having him lead that ship of America through the parade of nations in the rain. It was a moment that's going to live in infamy through the photo of LeBron at the front of that ship holding the flag. Oh my gosh. What a cool moment for LeBron there. Number 9. This little trio here is my celebrities kind of trio. It was Gaga, and then we got LeBron, and then we got Rafa Nadal, who was one of the torch bearers along the path to lighting the torch. So Rafa got I think Zinedine Zidane passed the torch, the flame, I should say, to Rafa, who then got on a boat with a couple other athletes, and they boated it over to another row of athletes who then eventually ran the flame to the actual torch. But Rafa Nadal, the note I wanted to include here at number 9 is that his excellence at the French Open earned him this part of the Paris Olympics. And what I mean by that is that Roland Garros, if you're not familiar with tennis, if you're not a big tennis fan, there's a major in tennis called Roland Garros. It's the French Open, and they play on clay. And Rafa Nadal is the most accomplished athlete ever at the French Open. He has the most French Open titles, most consecutive titles. He has dominated the French Open for decades. And him being so good at the French Open has made him into a French star, because that is their event, their yearly big global event, the French Open on clay in Paris. And he has been such a star at their event that this Spaniard has become a French star because of how good he is at tennis in France. And I thought, for Nadal, what a cool moment as he comes to the end of his career. He hasn't been able to play much this year because of all the injuries he's been dealing with the last couple of years. He hasn't been playing a lot the last couple of years, but he's found a way to be healthy for this one event. He's taken off most of the tennis season, and he's probably going to retire, I think, at the end of this year, maybe try and stretch it into the early part of next year, but his body's just broken down. But all year long, he's like, I have to do this. I have to end my career, or at least have this moment at the end of my career at the Paris Olympics, at Roland Garros in France, just to do this for the French people and for the cap of my career. And that's how much this tournament and France means to Rafa, and Rafa means to France, and that he's a part of the opening ceremony with the most important role, which is lighting the flame of the lighting the Olympic flame. So I thought that was really cool. As a Giant, if you listen to me for a long time on the Steve Danko podcast or on here, you know that Rafa Nadal is my favorite tennis player, and I wouldn't do this without talking about him and just giving some love to him for just the accomplishments in his career. And lastly, as we cap this off, the 10 notes, that was 9. I just wanted to shout out, the last one isn't really about the Olympic ceremonies. It's about the surfers in Tahiti who got shown at the Olympic ceremonies, and they got shown on camera, all of the athletes in Tahiti competing in surfing at the Olympics, because Tahiti is about 10,000 miles away from France. It's a French, French territory. They don't have the surfable waves in France to host surfing. So about 10,000 miles away in the French Polynesia, they have the surfing competition. And one thing I've been following on TikTok is the surfing Tahiti people, athletes, hanging out together on their cruise ship where they're staying. So they built an Olympic village on the water in Tahiti, and they're all kind of staying on a giant cruise ship that's floating in the water, except for Team USA, who decide to stay in their own hotel because they're fancy dancy and they're staying closer to the competition in a hotel. But the Tahiti surfing athletes who are 10,000 miles away, and to put that in perspective, I think I'm in Toronto right now. I'm closer to Tahiti than France is if they went around that side of the world and then they flew to where they're hosting the surfing competition, which is crazy. That's crazy to think about. That's where they're hosting surfing this year. So that's, I think, really fun for all of them that get to be on their own mini Love Island there with all the other surfers in the middle of the French Polynesian. But they also don't get to be near the games, which is a little disappointing, but it's a thing. But they also get their trip to Tahiti. And I thought it was fun that they showed them during the opening ceremonies, all of them on the beach, waving on their Love Island. So that's my 10 notes out of the opening ceremonies. Let me know if you checked out the opening ceremonies and what you thought of it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought France killed it with the bringing the culture to sport. I thought they did an amazing job with the outfits. I thought all of the countries had really cool, the outfits are what's becoming a real staple of the Parade of Nations, is seeing what each country brings to the table in terms of fashion. So that was fun to see. I didn't like how they didn't have closer views of the boats. This is one, note 11. It's 10 notes, but note 11. Get a closer. If you're going to do something like a boat in the middle of the river, get a little closer. Get a little closer so I can see the actual outfits, because the outfits are a big deal about what each country is wearing to the opening ceremonies. I need closer views and higher def cameras to see the outfits of the Parade of Nations. But I thoroughly enjoyed that presentation. Let me know what you thought in the comments or on Twitter, wherever you interact with the show. And to throw to something that's just breaking right now, Canada is receiving sanctions for their drone controversy. So if you've been following along, the last show we did was on Canada using drones for years to spy on practices of other teams that they're facing in major competitions. And they got caught this week using a drone to spy on New Zealand's practice. And now the FIFA, I was going to say the FIA, they got F1 on my mind. FIFA has released a statement about the sanctions for Canada for cheating. This is what they're saying. Accordingly, and after having evaluated all evidence on file, the chairman of the FIFA Appeal Committee has issued the following sanctions for violation of Art 13 of the FDC, offensive behavior and violations of the principles of fair play, and Art 6.1 of the OFT regulations, responsibilities in brackets. CSA, an automatic deduction, that's Canada Soccer, has an automatic deduction of 6 points from the Canadian Soccer Association women's representative team standing in Group A of the OFT, and a fine of CHF 200,000. That's a lot of acronyms. Basically, what has happened is FIFA has fined Canada Soccer 200,000 CHF. I guess that's French dollars. I don't know what currency that is. 200,000 something currency, and 6 points in the Group A standings of the Olympics. So these Olympics, Canada is minus 6 points. They beat New Zealand. Those 3 points are gone. Now they got to accumulate another 3 points to try and get back to 0. Oh, baby, it's going to be hard for them to get out of the group stage now. And then FIFA goes on to say, Beverly Priestman, Joseph Lombardi, and Jasmine Mander, each official suspended from taking part in any football-related activity for a period of 1 year. So Joseph Lombardi and Jasmine Mander were the 2 staffers that were caught on Monday filming New Zealand's practice with a drone. Beverly Priestman is the head coach of Team Canada, women's football team. She's been suspended for a year along with those 2 staffers. Wow. So what we have here, I'll finish this statement from FIFA. CSA Canada Soccer was found responsible for failing to respect the applicable FIFA regulations in connection with its failure to ensure the compliance of its participating officials of the OFT with the prohibition on flying drones over any training sites. The officials were found responsible for offensive behavior and violation of the principles of fair play in connection with the CSA women's representative team's drone usage in the scope of the OFT. So that's the Olympics. They were found in violation of, you're not allowed to fly drones at the Olympics to spy on people. They did that, so they are suspended. What I found fascinating with this is that there's no sanctions on any of the previously reported use of drones. So as we outlined last episode, Canada Soccer, both on the men's and women's sides, have been using drones for years, systematically, to spy on practices. And a lot of people have been asking, like, what can you gain from practice, or from spying on practices? It's like, it's not the biggest advantage. That's why I'm like, why were they so hard in using this? Why did they have to use this so consistently? Because, like, you're not gaining that much of an advantage. You can study film. You can watch other people's games and study films. This is crazy that you go to these lengths to spy on practices, but they've been doing this for years. And FIFA has determined that they don't need to punish them for anything in the past. They can't really prove it. What they can prove is that they did it at the Olympics this time. So Beverly Priestman, who's the head coach, clearly knew that they were going to be using the drone, so she's going to be suspended for a year, can't do anything with football, and the team at the Olympics is deducted 6 points. I think this is perfectly fair. I'm not up in arms about it. Initially, I thought they would go back and be like, you've been cheating for years. We may take away your gold medal from the last Olympics. We may take away what you've done in international competitions at the Women's World Cup previously. No, they were like, all we can prove is you did it this time. And if that's what they're looking at, if that is the violation that you did it this time, you filmed New Zealand with the drone, this seems fair. Let me know what you think about these sanctions. Let me know what you think about the opening ceremonies, wherever you interact with the show. Don't forget to hit subscribe on the channel. I appreciate every subscription that I receive. That is it for me right now. It looks like the Jays are trading Nate Pearson. Everything is breaking right now, but there's no return. Nate Pearson's going to the Cubs. I'm going to talk about that shortly. So look out for more from me today. Thanks for being here. Take care. From Toronto.
And that is how it's done.
The Jesse Blake Sports Report with Jesse Blake.
Jesse Blake, the guy that likes to hear his name twice in one sentence. Sure, I know him. No, he doesn't have an ego at all.